Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today here at Carparison. We're with Exeter Chiefs Director of Rugby, Rob Baxter. Now we've asked Rob to pick 5 of his most memorable moments throughout his career. So Rob, let's jump straight into them. The first moment you picked is from your playing days back in the 1996-97 season, and it was a particular win away to Reading that saw you secure promotion from the 3rd Division as champions. Would it be fair to say this was some last day drama?
It was really. I mean, I've tried to pick 5 moments that kind of top moments through my career and for different reasons. And obviously that first one, maybe from a little bit selfishly, obviously from playing in it and being captain, it was a huge moment for the club. And we probably didn't realise at the time how big a moment it was until you look back from where we are now. Because actually we've been in that 3rd tier of rugby since the inception of the league. So when the leagues first got in place, we were put in the 3rd tier. We stayed there for a number of years, and the year before we won the 3rd division, we got relegated. And the team changed a little bit based on relegation. I was still a relatively young player then, and became captain, and we had some young players join, and a variety of players come to the club that year probably from local clubs, because we kind of dropped down to a level where we were no different to any other local Devon club, really. And we managed to recruit some good players throughout the Devon clubs. And we really came together as a team that year in the 4th division, got promoted back into the 3rd division, the first time of asking, which was fantastic. And that team then became the core of a group who went on a fantastic run through that 3rd division to eventually win it. And again, I know it's a strange thing to say in hindsight, but it was a big league. I think it was about 30 league games that season.
Yeah.
And we went on a winning run that lasted 16 games towards that last game. And we would have finished 3rd if we'd have lost that last game. So it just shows you, we never realised it in that run of 16 games, but if we'd have lost any one of them, we would have finished 3rd and wouldn't have got promoted, because only the top 2 did. And as it was, we won 16 games on the bounce, including that final game, to get promoted as the champions. It was a really weird scenario that, I'd say, at any stage we could have blown it, and to be part of a team that went on that 16-game run, and then to finish it off away at Reading, the trophy being there, for the 3rd division trophy. The Leeds chairman was there, because if we'd have lost, Leeds would have won it, and they'd have gone off with the trophy. And it was just a fantastic club effort through a lot of tough games, and it was more that to look back on that season, that 16-game run, and how many tough games we had in that run, to win a league we'd never won before, and to get promoted out to the highest league level Exeter's ever been. To look back on that was a really important moment for us, because it's the steps up the league ladder that eventually let you get to the top where we are now. And you've got to make sure you appreciate everyone, the hard work that happened to get there. And as I said, at the time it just felt great, and a little bit daunting for a club that had never been in the 2nd division. But I think we did feel that we were capable of being a decent 2nd division club, which would have been in the top 24 clubs in the country. And at that stage, that was very much our ambition, to prove ourselves at that level. So that was really, for us, the first step. And I was very proud to be captain in the team that achieved that.
Yeah, and looking back on that sort of time period for the club, obviously the Exeter Chiefs that we know and love now, is it almost night and day to see how the club's grown?
It is a little bit, yeah. To be fair, I think at that stage we'd already talked about what possible development plans could be. We were obviously based at the county ground in St Thomas, which the older viewers of rugby will know was a combined rugby stadium, had a greyhound track around the outside of the pitch, and had a speedway, the Exeter Falcon Speedway track around the outside. So it was a multi-purpose kind of county stadium. That's what it's called, the county ground. I played my whole career there, as did my dad and my uncle, in the time they played for Exeter. So it was a pretty historic ground. It was the first ground that the All Blacks played in their first tours to this country. So it's a relatively historic ground, but it was there in the middle of a relatively built-up area in St Thomas. Yeah. Obviously, people were aware there was a value to it even back then. I mean, that's 97, 20 odd years ago. And I think the plans started put in place then about what could the club do potentially to move forward. Professionalism was starting then. Obviously, what is different is obviously the facilities, and the team were obviously all part time. Everybody worked, but the seeds of professionalism and improvement and wanting to keep developing as a club and move on was certainly there then. So there's very much the seeds of what you see kind of Tony Rowe achieving his business plans and getting to see Stanley Park and the developments that are still ongoing. They were certainly being sown then, yes.
Yeah, and one thing we've done ahead of this interview is ask Exeter Chiefs supporters actually to send in any questions they had to potentially put to you. And one from Tin Wennell, he asked about your fondest memories of the county ground.
It's strange because some of my fondest memories will be different to other people's. I mean, I really enjoyed kind of playing in it. It was a pretty poor surface at times during the winter, but I pretty much enjoyed it because often you could go out on the pitch and have a walk around, start your warm up, and you'd see the opposition turn up and they start looking at the pitch, and you could see them shaking their heads and questioning each other. And we actually, it was strange in our time in the second division in particular, and we were there for 8 or 9 years. Our time in the second division, well, maybe longer than that, maybe 10, 11 years, we beat some of the teams, some very good teams. We often beat the relegated Premiership team, or we beat the team that was top of the league. We were never quite good enough until our final season we got promoted to top it out over that period. But we always had some success at the county ground, and I enjoy numerous happy memories where we kind of dragged the team down into a real fight in the mud, and we played above ourselves and they probably played a bit below themselves, and those are some of my best memories. It's not necessarily playing in front of a massive crowd, because crowds weren't huge, or just being that big a deal. It's more that we put in some really huge team efforts there, and probably on good many occasions played above ourselves, and then got to celebrate it together in the bar and enjoyed that camaraderie side of it. So I've got a few good memories, but a lot of them are unfortunately based around battles in the mud, which used to be our speciality, and they're not anymore, because we play on a Deso pitch, and we expect every game to be played at high tempo and to get on with things. So it is a slight change up for me.
So if we fast forward a few years, more drama at the end of the 09-10 season, a playoff win against Bristol, a day I'm sure fans will remember fondly, to secure promotion to the Premiership. How were your nerves on that day? Probably
as bad as I can ever remember, because this is probably, even now after we've won Heineken Cups and Premierships, and been in the Premiership a while, and people ask me what's the game that really I remember now, and I talk about it, the hair stand up on the back of my neck. It's this game, because we knew we had a chance that year. We knew Bristol were maybe not as strong as other teams that had been relegated. We'd obviously had a change up in the coaching structure and the way things were at the club, and I was pretty confident that we could be there or thereabouts by the end of the season. And we went for it, and it was a changed up season, because for the first time it wasn't going to be a team that won the league that went through. It was going to be quite a big an extended playoff situation where 8 teams went through, 2 pools of 4, and then they played off against each other, and then the top 2 teams, when all that ended up playing, would play a double leg final. And we worked our way through that very well, and we won a lot of games, we played well, but we also were aware that actually winning the league wasn't that big a deal.
Yeah.
And about halfway through the season, when we felt comfortable where we were going to end up in the league, if we were going to end up in the top 2 or 3, we actually forfeited winning some games by going on almost like a pre-season in the middle of the pitch. It was a bit of a gamble, and it took a lot of planning, and it certainly wasn't all down to me. The other coaching staff and our medical staff and our fitness staff all kind of chimed in and decided it would be a good way to go. And we actually lost 2 or 3 games, including losing at home to Bristol. That really, although they hurt us in the table, they didn't hurt us too much psychologically, because we knew what we were doing. We weren't really training on the pitch. We were in the gym, and we were really focusing on being good at the end of the season.
Yeah.
And actually, by the end of the season, that worked really well for us, because in the final, we actually came out on top physically and mentally and emotionally over 2 legs. We won the first leg at home, by 3 points, like 9-6, something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember everyone saying it wouldn't have been enough. But I remember watching the game. It was one of the most physical games of rugby I've ever seen, including watching games in the Premiership. It's a huge game. And I think it gave us a lot of confidence that we could certainly match them physically. And then going up to Bristol was just such an incredible experience. And the moment I got on the bus at Exeter, you could tell there was something amazing. It was going to be an amazing thing. Now, when you get on the bus, you don't know if it's going to be amazingly good or amazingly bad, but you know something's happening. There's some emotion to it. And getting to the ground and walking around, seeing the amount of extra supporters that were there, catching up with my wife and kids before the game, watching the players' faces, the way they were preparing, the stuff that was said in the changing room, the way the coaching staff emotionally prepared the players, the way the players bought into it. It was just an incredible night. It was just, the whole atmosphere was just electric. And, it was certainly a night befitting of the team getting promoted, taking that huge step, and then going on and doing what we've done. It was just one of those things. It's very hard to explain unless you were there.
Yeah.
But it's very strange that every person I've ever met, talked about, who was there, was part of that team, or was a supporter there, every single one of them talks the same. And most of them just said it was magical. It was magical. And they don't really know how to describe it.
Yeah. And when you reflect back on the promotion, we actually had a question in from Michael Hunt. He asked what your sort of noticeable differences were from your days playing in the Championship then into promotion, whether that be, like you say, like a physical battle, or was it more tactical? Was there any huge differences for you?
Yeah, there was a lot. I mean, the team that got promoted was the best team we've been able to put out in the Championship. I think physically we were better prepared, emotionally, mentally, game plan wise. We got a lot right in that final year. It was putting those jigsaw pieces together that got us there. And I think that's what happened. We created a group of probably 20 or 25 players who could play at the intensity of a Premiership team. And as I say, it was interesting because a lot of people were talking about, with the preparation in the playoffs and whatever it's going to be in the Championship, would it be a good enough preparation for the Premiership? And interestingly, I think the one thing that playoffs proved was it almost made you more prepared for the Premiership, because previously, if you won the league, you knew you won it, and potentially sometimes quite a long time before the end. So some of the Premiership teams who've been relegated to the Championship would fly through it, win a lot of games, and with 3 or 4 weeks of the season left, would know they got promoted.
Yeah.
And so actually, their last few games were never that big and never that intense for them. Whereas when you go to the Championship playoffs, as they were, and it was 6 pool games, then a 2 leg semi-final. Your last 7-8 games were like absolute humdingers. Every single one was absolutely flat out. They were amazing games. And the double leg final, as I say, was way more physical than actually our first game in the Premiership. And so I think it really prepared us well. It was that physical intensity level. And alongside that, and we talk about these things a lot now in the Premiership a lot, a long time maintaining that huge physical intensity, you've got to really maintain an emotional and a mental discipline around that as well, and a real focus. And I think that's the difference. That's the challenge. The challenge is aligning the two as long as you can of those 80 minutes, and that's what we've managed to do that season in the Championship. And ultimately, when we've won Heineken Cups and Premierships, it's been exactly the same. It's the team who can maintain those two things for as long as the 80 minutes as possible that comes out winning. Because everyone watches games with any sport, and it ebbs and flows. It's never just a one-way street, and you've just got to control as much of the 80 minutes as you can. And I would say that. And that on the line, don't forget that obviously for a fair time we were in the Championship and I was playing, we were only part-time.
Yeah.
So a lot of guys had full-time jobs. And of course, as we got into those latter years in the Championship, it was a full-time squad, a full-time professional focus purely on rugby and winning. So that was the probably biggest change for me, is that I was never more as a player than someone who worked and then trained around it. Trained in the morning and trained in the evening. So that's probably the biggest difference. And obviously that physical preparation was a huge part of that. But then we've had plenty of, in those days we had full-time players who wouldn't have been able to go and play in the Premiership because they wouldn't have been allowed be able to align that mental kind of focus and accuracy for long enough through an 80 minutes that is required as well.
Yeah. How between yourself and your coaching team, how do you sort of set that agenda from a resilience and a mental standpoint that you build up this courage and belief within the team to go on? And I guess it starts in that sort of championship season where you build the foundations and kind of trying to kick on, and it's probably what you've seen throughout your time at Exeter Chiefs, to have that mental resilience to kind of build on and build the success on.
Yeah, it's never been like a one-step process or a two-step process or a ladder with fundamentals. What you kind of have to do, and this is kind of I suppose the bit about leadership, almost different leadership styles and the way you lead guys. You kind of need to look at the guys you've got, the players you've got in the group, and decide which is the best way to keep them on track mentally. So yeah, physically you can do quite a few things. So the one thing we knew in the Championship, and the one thing we knew when we first went to the Premiership, was that we can't control how good other teams are. You know, they've got talented players, some of them got more money to spend, bigger squads, England internationals, etc. So you can't control how good they're going to be. So what can you control? Well, you can control your physical preparation. So you can keep things relatively simple and go, well, the one thing we're going to control today when we train is how hard we train, because we can't stop anybody else doing what they're doing, but we know how hard we can train. Our lads, particularly early in the Premiership and in that Championship team, really bought into that. Now, it's only worth doing that, but then when you get into the game, you go, right, well, we're going to use our physical preparation as much as we can. So we're going to keep this very simple for you guys. And when we first went to the Premiership, that's what we talked about. So we're going to aim to keep the ball. We're not going to try and kick and get territory and just try and squeeze our way through to a 6-3 win. And the reason we didn't say this to the players, but the reason we did that as a coaching group was because we didn't want the others to plug the ball, because they had too many good players, too many good attackers, and they fed the ball too much, so they were bound to score. So we took another approach, said, look guys, just like we're saying to you in training, if you're all working really hard, do the best you can, that's good enough for us. And we said the same for the games. You know, you go out there and we know you've worked flat out, you've prepared through the week, you've worked flat out in this game, we can't expect any more of you, and we're going to enjoy it. We're going to enjoy whatever game we have in the Premiership. We're going to take the pressure off ourselves a bit. We're not going to just try and squeeze out not finishing bottom of the Premiership. We're going to get the best we can out of every game, and we'll see where we end up. And so we gave them some resilience initially by taking pressure off them. And I think this is where it's never one way fits all, because so the game was never lost, and there was never any point to not playing, even if we went 2 or 3 scores down, because the way they were going to be judged at the end of the day was how hard they'd worked, how hard they set the game plan, and if they'd done what we decided we were going to do as a team, regardless of the end result. So early in the Premiership, that gave us a lot of resilience, because the final score wasn't the be-all and end-all. And actually that allowed us to have the freedom to play the way we wanted, which did challenge actually quite a lot of Premiership teams, so they weren't used to it. And we actually, because we did that, we collected some points early in the league that put opposition under pressure, and that's kind of what happened in the Gloucester game. The next game, the Gloucester game, is very much aligned with this, in our first game in the Premiership, because it allowed us to go after that game looking to enjoy it and looking to win it, but also knowing that it wasn't the end of the world for us, and we weren't going to get relegated to the back of losing one game. And so there was some resilience and confidence built by removing some pressure. And I think as we get later on, I won't talk about it too much now, but that changes, because later on, you create your resilience and your toughness in a different way and in a more individual way, and that takes a few years of management. But initially our resilience was based a lot around the fact that if we took into control things we could, which was working hard, playing hard, then that was good enough, because it had to be, because there was nothing else we could ask the lads to do.
Yeah.
And then I talk a lot to people about, you've got to make sure then as a coaching group, you're not on a huge emotional roller coaster where if the lads walk off and they've lost, they don't see the coach's staff standing there like the world's come to an end. And at the same time, if they walk off and they've won, they don't see you jumping up and down like you've won the Premiership. What they see is a group who going, well done, you've worked hard today, we've got our rewards, or well done, you worked hard today, you stuck at it, and we haven't quite got what we wanted to do. And we just kept a resilient group together by very much taking that approach for those first years in the Premiership.
So yeah, you mentioned it there, the first game back in the Premiership against Gloucester. a good Gloucester team as well. How impressed were you with the performance on that day when, emotions would have no doubt been running high, and it was a really impressive team performance?
Yeah, it was, because the interesting thing is, I think obviously we look back at things occasionally as a coaching group, and actually when you look how many close games we had in our initial time in the Premiership, we won a lot of games by 3 points or one score. And interestingly, when we look back now, 11 years later, we kind of go, I never realised those games were that close and that pressurised us. When you look back, you go, well, we did okay that season. But because now, I'm not being funny, if I'm sitting here watching us only in the league by 3 points, it worries me now. I'm really worried about it. So I can imagine what I must have been like back then. And yet, what we did is we just kept fighting. And the truth is, I don't mind saying it, we probably should have lost. But we probably should have lost in a funny way. It's a funny thing to say, because what Gloucester did is we played well enough to keep them under a fair bit of pressure, which meant they didn't just score a couple, 2 or 3 tries and take the pressure off themselves. They were struggling to score against it. They were struggling to play against it. They took a lot of kicks at goal. And interestingly, their kicker missed quite a lot. And Gareth Stevenson didn't miss a lot. And we scored a good try. And we just created in that game enough pressure, enough doubt on them for things to happen. And we didn't dominate any one particular area of the game, but we did what we said we were going to do. We were going to go flat out. We were going to work really, really hard. We weren't going to give Gloucester anything easy. We weren't just going to give them the ball. We weren't going to just kick it away to them. If we had the chance to play, we were going to play. And another one of our policies at the time was that we want you to play because we want you to have lots of touches on the ball, because we want you to become a good Premiership player. We didn't have a lot of Premiership experience. We had 1 or 2 players in our starting 15 that never played in the Premiership or any level that was above the Championship. So we said to them, we want you to experience today. We want you to take part in it. So get your hands on the ball, make as many tackles as you can, get involved. Make you a better Premiership player. You're going to play in a Premiership game today. I think all those things, they just came together enough for us to come through. A really quite tight game, quite an emotional day, big crowd. It was our first Premiership crowd we'd ever had, and it gave us that, and it straight away, why it was such an important game was not only that we had some belief in ourselves, which was going to be important, but I think if we'd have lost closely, we'd have still had some belief in ourselves. But the flip thing that happened was that because we collected some winning points, very quickly we put pressure on a couple of other teams, because what's always been a big story in the Premiership is that there's always 2 or 3 teams go into the next season with an aim of just not being relegated.
Yeah.
And to me that always felt strange, because we've never taken that approach. So that first year in the Premiership, we didn't go in and we never talked about avoiding relegation. Never even talked about relegation. Never even came up as these are the points you need to relegation. We never talked about the season being a battle. And I was watching other teams going, it's going to be the Premiership season, the toughest season you'll ever be involved in. It's going to be a battle. It's a fight to avoid relegation. We never spoke like that, because I said to our lads, this is going to be a fantastic experience. We're going to enjoy every game. Have a beer together afterwards. If it's an away game, we'll get on the bus and have a couple of beers and we'll talk about the game. We're going to enjoy every moment of this. We're not going to let 1 minute pass by. It's going to be incredible. So our whole approach was just a bit different to 2 or 3 other teams. And so the minute we won that Gloucester game, you had 2 or 3 other teams who their whole target going into the league was to avoid being relegated, to make sure they stayed in the Premiership. Straight away they were 4 points behind us. So they lost their first game. And I think that psychological shift we managed to make in 1 game, not just for ourselves, because I think we could have been okay, but what the damage we did to some other teams and the pressure we put them under and how it affected how they played and saw the season really panned out. You look at how Newcastle ended up playing through that season, really panned out in our favour massively.
How satisfying is that from a coaching perspective for you and your team, where you've planned for the season ahead, you've put all the preparation work in, and then you get that first win under your belt, albeit it may have been a bit of a nervous one, but it just builds that platform and solidifies that belief that this is the right approach to take.
I mean, it was fantastic for us, because what the big thing you've always got to do as a coach or a leader, it's not about telling people what to do. And we still talk about it. Well, even now, when I see some of our experienced coaches just going off track and thinking, we just need to tell the players to do this, and because you can tend to get why don't we need to do it? If I tell them to do this, because the reality is what you have to do is you have to give people a why. And I think what we've managed to do here as a coaching group really is we've managed to always put in front of the players, this is why we need to be like this is why we need to do it. Now obviously when we're talking about how we're preparing for a game, how we're preparing for the season, what our tactics are going to be, you need to give them some whys. So we sold them the whys around controlling the ball, how it would improve us as a team, how we were going to experience the Premiership, and they all like those. They're really good whys. But actually, what the real big defining thing that makes it all make sense is the win. So the minute that win went in, all those reasons we were giving the players, this is how it happened, this is why we want you to do this, this is why, and we explained it to them. It all made sense then, it all ticked the box. And then that allowed all the whys to be introduced later on through the season and then later on into the season. But with that group of players, it allows that bit of belief and that bit of trust that's quite important. But even then, you've always got to be careful that you always make sure you're saying to them why. And which is obviously the beauty of it. When you're coaching, you're able to do a lot of things like show video analysis, look at these scenarios, look at this repeat situation where if we'd have done this, this is the outcome that could have been better. This is why we're going to do it. So from a coach perspective, you do get to have the opportunity to show whys quite a lot. And obviously the key is just making sure that there's that continual buy-in, that we always need that proof at the end that the reasoning works. And obviously that Gloucester game helped us massively in that area.
Yeah. Now, it won't come as a great surprise to any supporters that on your list as your fourth moment is the 2016-17 final. After missing out the year before, this was a final that really delivered on some great rugby and lots of drama. What were your memories of that day?
I think my biggest memory of it, and from a coach perspective, my most satisfying thing was getting back there after the season before.
Yeah.
In many ways, and in the way we got there as well, because the season before it was a fantastic season. It was the first time we'd ever been in the top four. So we hadn't even qualified for semi-finals pre then, and we finished second. I think it was second place, or might even finished first. I can't really remember. We got a home semi-final, and we actually, ironically, played Wasps, so we ended up playing the final, and we actually played really well. But we played really well, I think, because we'd never been in the top four and we'd never played in the semi-final, and it was a huge game. It was by far the biggest game in the club's history as regards the level we played at. And we played really well in that semi-final, and getting to the final was just amazing. And it kind of doesn't matter how I try and talk about that week or how our prep went. But our prep went well, and we were in good nick, and we didn't have too many injury issues and turned up. But kind of from that first moment, you could tell that it was lovely to be there.
Yeah.
Watching the players walk out and walk around Twickenham and the way we did that, it was great to be in a final. It was a huge experience just getting there. And I think, I always try to be someone who says, well, you don't need to experience everything to be good at it, because you do need to try and create more shortcuts for success than saying you've got to get to the final and lose it first. Because you don't have to get to the final and lose it first. You can get to the final and win. We got to the Champions Cup final, semi-final and final for the first time last year, and we won the both. So you don't have to get there and lose. But you do have to learn from experiences and gain it. And I think actually the group of players we had and the group of coaches, I don't think we could genuinely prepare properly without experiencing it, because ironically, I think in some ways our support base here being so good and so fervent, in an odd kind of way, might have even played against us on the day, because we turn up at Twickenham and the coach. There are Exeter Chiefs supporters everywhere, lining the road right through into the Twickenham Stadium. They're singing songs, they're banging on the side of the bus. It was incredible. And, I'll tell you, it started a real emotional level, starting very early. 2 hours before kick-off, it's all going off. And I don't think we ever really got our feet back on the ground until quite late in the game. Quite late in the game, we actually pulled it back around again and made it quite respectful and played some good rugby.
Yeah.
But early on, we just went to the races. We were nowhere near our best, and it showed. And so I think to know we hadn't shown our best was good for us, because that following year, the year we did win it, we had a real bit of grit about how we wanted to go through the league season. We were determined to kind of put some rights wrong. And then we get to the semi-final again at home, so we've done really well. We finished second to Wasps, which means we draw Saracens at our place. And obviously Saracens are the European champions, they're the reigning European and Premiership champions. And it was just absolute humdinger of a game. We won it in the last play with one of the most incredible experiences I've ever seen at Sandy Park. You know, we have a scrum on the halfway line that we have to win. The minutes are running out, and we put a big scrum in and win a penalty. Henry Slade kicks a monster kick to 5 metres out, and I always walk up there. And interestingly enough, one of the things we show to new players sometimes isn't the video of that last drive. You take the video out and you just put the audio on, and the audio is amazing. You know, the crowd when they see that kick go in until we score the try is just amazing. You know, the chanting, it almost feels like, if you listen, it almost feels like there's no way we couldn't have scored. And it's just one of those moments that any player who's on the pitch or involved will remember. And it really worried me at the time, because I remember being massively emotional in the last couple of minutes of that game, because it did feel like we played really well in the game. Sound scored a late try. It did feel like it slipped away from us as a massive opportunity, and then to throw it into the end like that was this massive outpouring of emotion. And then I remember kind of thinking to myself, "Geez, we've got to get our feet on the ground. We don't have a season like last season where the semi-final was our biggest game of the year." And I remember getting on the pitch and just trying to grab the players who were obviously very happy, and just saying, "Come on, we've got to get our heads down here. We've got to get off this pitch. We've got to get our heads down. We can enjoy tonight, but we've got to decide we're going to win a final."
Yeah.
And so that to deal with that and the experience of that, and then go into the Wasps game and it being like the game it was, with so many emotional highs and lows, us taking the lead, them taking the lead, us fighting back to being drawing late in the game, going into extra time, and then the way we played in extra time was fantastic. You know, we dominated and controlled possession and territory for the second half, and Stino knocks his kicks over, and you know we win the game. You know, it's something very special, and obviously now we're an experience we have been for this last 12 months. To be there with the sellout crowd, all the families and friends and everybody there, it just made it an incredible day, and it rounded off one chapter, I suppose. Maybe one chapter in our Premiership time, in that at some stage when we were the Premiership, we want to be the winners of it, and so it ticked off that first box of how far can you progress in the Premiership, because at the end of the day, you can't progress any further than winning it. No matter what anybody says. Yeah, obviously you can win it multiple times, but you know, winning it, even if you only win it once, you know, something no one can ever take away from you. It was a massive marker in what we wanted to achieve as a professional rugby club.
Yeah, it really solidified that rise, didn't it? And I guess it almost made it that little bit sweeter to win it the second time around at the second attempt, like you said.
I think it did. I think it added to it in a lot of ways. And I think about the group involved, it's funny how even now we've still got quite a few people and players who are involved in that team, and it's really good to hear them keep talking about that they felt they'd let themselves down a little bit in that final. And I think it's really important that they remember that now, because ultimately, if we're going to win the Premiership this year, if we're going to even get in the top 4, which we still got to fight for, if we're going to fight to get in the top 2, which is still pretty tough for us to do, we've got some tough games to win. And then to win a semi-final, some of that thought about making sure you make the most of every minute of every day is still very important. It's still a driver here at the club, and we're going to need that to win another Premiership, because you know the one thing you can't do is have an off day. You just can't do. You've got to be driven by all your experiences and all your emotion when you hit the pitch, because you've got to expect the opposition to be like that.
Yeah. Again, for the fifth and final moment, no real surprises, but it is the 2019-20 Heineken Cup final that saw Chiefs crowned champions of Europe. We can touch on what that meant for the club in a moment, but I want to start with another question from a supporter, and it's from Matthew Bennett, and it's quite a specific question. So he wants to know what was going through your head at half-time and then a minute before the final whistle as well.
Half-time. At half-time, I was obviously pleased. We were going okay. We weren't. We hadn't probably rounded it all off like we wanted to after a very good start. that first half. But what we tried to do, and we do this often against particularly big physical teams, particularly some of the French teams, is we talk a lot about the 80-minute performance and what the 80 minutes will need to be like for you to come out on top. And a huge part of that is the intensity you can play at while trying to maintain your composure, as I said before. Yeah. And I thought we'd done that very well. And I thought we learned quite a lot of what we'd have to do in that game when we beat Toulouse in the semi-final. Because, without doubt, we went into that game massively based on the 80-minute performance. And to be fair, Toulouse are a good side. You've started them, and they won the Heineken Cup this year. And they came at us so hard for kind of 25, 30 minutes. We were hanging in there a little bit. I think we went 6-0 up. But I was almost kind of quite pleased because Toulouse weren't getting anything easy. They weren't running in tries. Everything they did, they had to be big and physical. They had to really try and work hard. And a massive part of the process when you play a big physical French team is to try and put them on the floor as much as possible. So they've got to keep getting off the floor. They've got to keep doing the things that are fatiguing them. Make their forwards work hard at the scrum and hard at the maul. You just try and create a fatigue element that they will start to challenge them. And now, when we did against Toulouse in the semi-final, we created a little golden 10-minute period for half time when we scored 2 tries for charge. And then we created it again in the second half to see it off. And I kind of thought we were getting that way in the racing game, but I was a little bit worried because we hadn't managed to do it as well as we had against Toulouse. We haven't quite created the full-on fatigue, the full-on energy dip I was hoping to see. So a big thing at half-time is to make sure that we start the second half very, very hard to try and see if we could create that energy dip later in the game. And actually, we did to a degree succeed in that. But what happened was we gave away a couple of penalties around midfield, which gave them field position. And then obviously the yellow card came. Now, ultimately probably Racing Metro will say they made a mistake because they tied the game up. Tied the game up, I think. With a kick of goals they didn't take, but they went for the win, they went for the corner, and we managed to turn them over on the line with a bit of heroic defence. But actually, that's what it took. In that game, there wasn't that many moments of actually like on our line heroic defence. There was one, and obviously people massively remember it because it was so late in the game. But there were loads of things that happened in that game, swings and roundabouts around scoring, not scoring, like Nosey pulling that intercept off, and I believe Henry Slade tried how well we played early on with our momentum game, that we were brave early on and went to the corner and scored tries rather than taking kicks at goal. There were loads of things that built that moment to be such a big moment where we turned them over on our try line. And obviously, after the game, I'm not sure, it wasn't like it was something I wanted to jump up and down and sing about, but I just remember, it was interesting because we got caught on camera, I remember just looking at guys and just being so happy.
Yeah.
Just being so happy for them because I watched what they'd done all season and how hard they'd worked. And we played a double header. We played 2 games a week when the Premiership season started again. They'd had to do it all. They'd had some of the biggest games of their lives. A European quarter-final, a European semi-final, a European final. All of it without their family there, without their loved ones there, without friends there, and they'd won it, and they'd done it themselves, and they deserved it. They'd done the work. They deserved it. They've been tough, and they've done what we asked them to do, and they've laid their bodies on the line. And I just felt so proud of them and so pleased. And obviously, from a bigger perspective, from a club perspective, it was a bit like, oh, well, there you go. It can be done. It can be done, and the hard work's all been worth it. So it was a funny feeling. The 2 buses that week, that bus back from Bristol and the bus back from Twickenham when we beat Gloucester again to win the double header. I think people sometimes think that they must be like going mental and everybody changed that, and don't get, a few guys do, because for a few guys that's their expression of relief, whatever. But interestingly, quite a lot of the winning buses tend to be quieter affairs than the losing buses, and I know it sounds a bit odd because you like to have that bit of time to reflect and talk and have a few quiet beers or a couple of glasses of champagne or whatever it is you can do, because you want to remember it, you want to talk about it, you want to relish it and be satisfied by it and really take part in all of the whole day. And actually, potentially what happens when you lose is everyone tends to feel, right, well, we've got to show we're not that bothered, and everybody gets drunk. It is funny how the reactions are different. And so it was a really nice experience. And then what I think was very satisfying for me as well was to read comments from people afterwards saying it's probably the best ever championship final. Both teams scoring tries. Nigel Owen saying it's the best championship final he'd ever refereed. Because actually, we do watch a lot of Heineken Cup finals, and often they are decided by 5 or 6 kicks of goal. They're different affairs. They're more edgy and more cagey. And it just kind of becomes almost like a battle of wits as well as a battle of wills and a battle of ambition. And I thought that was a big compliment to us. And all of those things, they've all been those next chapters. As I said, winning the Premiership for the first time was a big chapter in a part of the club's history. And then moving on and winning the Heineken Cup ticked another huge box, because I know the players had targeted European success for a couple of years. Once you've won a Premiership, yes, you want to win a Premiership, you get, but your next target has to be a Heineken Cup. It should be. And of course, to achieve that was something special with that group of players, or for that group of players.
Yeah. How did it feel to put, of course, the rise of the club has really put Exeter on the map from a rugby point of view, but with European success, that really solidified that, didn't it? And to put them on a global scale. How did that feel for you?
Yeah, it did. And I think bigger picture, when you want to talk about long-term success, obviously becoming a European kind of brand is huge, and it really is. And I think myself personally, I sometimes probably don't realise it until I go to like a business lunch or I meet other people in Exeter Council and things they talk about. The amount of times now, a couple of people have come to me and said, look, we've done some actual work on the finance of the city and what having a Premiership and European winning rugby club brings here. And they talk about millions and not hundreds of thousands of pounds, millions and millions of pounds worth of revenue comes through the city based on us being successful here. People want to be linked to the club, people want to visit the club, spending their money here, spending their time here. We probably, even now, we don't always appreciate it. But I think we're definitely aware now that if we want to, I'm not saying cash in, but we want to make the most of it, and we want to build on it, and we want it to come again. There's various things we've got to do here at the club, and anybody who comes to the club now will see those things ongoing. The hotel is only months from completion. It's not years away. It's months. We had a director had a walk around it yesterday. It's a huge building. There's still plenty to be done there, but you can see it's getting there. The shell is completely up. There are some rooms fitted out. There are a couple of floors that are nearly there, nearly complete. If you look at the views out the Gloucester areas where they're going to have bars and bistros and restaurants, it's going to be a fantastic addition to the club, and the club are going to own that. And we're also well into the work on developing the East Terrace into a reformed East Terrace with seating over the top and a new extension on the roof, and the stadium's going to feel like a very special place with a large increased capacity by the time the next season starts. That's how quickly things are going to be up and running. By December, the hotel should be online. There's some things that we really want to grow and expand here, and we want to become a regular top flight Premiership club as soon as we can.
Yeah, and I want to finish with this question from Dean Marshall. I'd be interested to hear your answer. He asked if you could relive one moment, and I'm sure it's a question you've been asked a lot, but there are so many to choose from within your coaching career. If you could relive one moment, one match, one season, what would it be for you?
It's difficult, really, because there's been so many. And I think if you go and live it again, it's different, isn't it? Because if you live it again in hindsight, you go back and enjoy it. Yeah. And all these games that I'm talking about would be very hard to enjoy at the time, because there's highs and lows, and there's a nervousness and an emotion going into them. If you wanted to go back without any experience, any hindsight, you just have to get on with it and do it. Still think that even in Bristol, there was something about it. There was just something about it. and I don't know what it is, because it's difficult. Because some of those other games, these huge games you've had, we've had a crowd there, but we've had a crowd that's been used to being there and used to talking and cheering. And I think that night at Bristol, I don't know what it was. There was just something about the players, something about the crowd, something about the evening, something about the whole occasion that was just different to anything else I've experienced. And it might well be that it felt different for me because I was last year as a head coach, director of rugby, whatever you want to call it. Maybe it felt the responsibilities were there solely, and I hadn't dealt with it all that much. But there was something incredible that night, and it's just very hard to put your finger on. And I think there's been other days where I've been fantastically proud of the lads, and I don't mind telling you, a lot of the experience I've got, I'm most proud of the players isn't games we've won. There's some of the games we've lost, where we've stood and fought. We went away to Leinster in our first Heineken Cup game ever. We went away to Leinster and lost by 3 points. And they had every single international star. They had Brian and Driscoll, they had them all on the pitch. And we should have won the game. We literally did. It's very hard because I never talk about it. We literally got a real couple of bad refereeing decisions against us to let them take a late penalty to win it, and we didn't get. We could have had a couple of penalties before, so it was out of the same things and didn't get them. And that game could have just. But I couldn't have been any prouder whether we'd won or lost that game. So there's moments like that, but I think for overall experience, to want to sit there, I wouldn't want to go back there, because I wouldn't want to go back there. I wouldn't want to go back to doing the whole Premiership journey again, because as credible as it's been tough. But for a one-off experience, there was just something special, and I don't really know how to explain it.
Yeah, very fond memories. So Rob, that wraps up our questions. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us here at Carparison, and we wish you all the best for the rest of the season.
Right, thanks very much, Brian.